Hi everyone, welcome or welcome back. My name is Ania and today I will be sharing with you my labor and delivery story. I actually had a great pregnancy, nothing eventful for the full term of my pregnancy, and when I was 36 weeks pregnant, I had my weekly exam, which when you get that far advanced in your pregnancy, you go every week to get checked out. At the 36-week visit, when I went into the doctor's office, the doctor that saw me that day, he actually asked me if I wanted to get a pelvic exam, and I asked what that really entailed. He did ask me if I was experiencing any pain or bleeding, and when I said I wasn't, he said, "Oh no, don't worry about it, then we really don't need to perform a pelvic exam. It's only in the event that you are experiencing maybe some contractions that we like to verify if everything's okay. But we could definitely skip it for this week and go from there." So what he basically did was feel on the outside of my belly and confirmed that my baby was actually in a good position and facing downward. And after I left the office that day, I did a little bit of research to kind of really understand the normalcy of having that pelvic exam performed, and I found out that, take it with a grain of salt because I did find this out in the internet, but I found out that if you do go through a pelvic exam, you run more risk of getting an infection. So I actually went back on my 37-week visit and I opted out of the pelvic exam again because, again, I was not feeling any pain and I wasn't experiencing any bleeding either, so I figured that would be perfectly fine. And so during my 36 and 37-week visit, they both times just felt on the outside of my belly, confirmed that the baby did seem to be facing in the right position, so downward, and everything was good to go. So then I went for my 38-week visit, and this time I saw a doctor that I had actually never seen before. In the practice that I went to monitor my pregnancy, to see the progress of my pregnancy, these doctors actually work together in a practice, but they make it a point to see to scatter the appointments so that every single doctor in the practice sees you, in the event that when you deliver, there's a different doctor on call and you can get familiarized with the person. Well, 38 weeks into it, this was definitely the first time I had ever seen this new doctor, and she became really upset when she looked at my chart and noticed that I had not gotten up until this point a pelvic exam. When I explained to her what was said to me during 36 weeks of pregnancy and also what I had researched and what I told the doctor during my 37-week visit, she became even more upset. She said that my concern for infection was nonsensical and that now it was just too late, that there was no point in checking me at that point at the 38-week visit, because even if the baby was not facing in the right position, there was nothing that they can do about it at that time. So she just very abruptly said, if the baby is breech, we're just gonna have to give you a C-section and that's it, because there's absolutely nothing that we can do at this point. And I was very distraught because up until that point, I had a very normal and super non-eventful pregnancy. It was really great and I had no indication that anything was going wrong at any moment. So to actually come to that, to that 38-week visit so close to the end and feel like, hey, something really might be wrong here, and I could have prevented it, was really, really shocking. So she just very abruptly finished the consultation, didn't take a second look at me or my belly, didn't touch it or, under or over my shirt. She just said, if the baby is breech, we have to give you a C-section. There's nothing we could do about it at this point, and that was it. And I remember leaving there really concerned because I knew that there was a possibility that this person would be the one that would deliver my baby if if she was on call when I went into labor. And I was very concerned that would be the case, because I felt like she would be the type that would jump right away into a C-section situation, which I only wanted if it was truly necessary. So I left there that day, kind of trying to cling to any shred of hope that I had that everything was totally fine and she must have been having a bad day or something. But then after my 38-week visit, that same weekend, so I had my visit on a Friday, and that weekend, that Saturday, I began to have extreme back pain. If I were to sit down for a long period of time, I felt like my back was just hurting so much, and I had to get up and walk around and until it actually went away. And that weekend was actually Thanksgiving Sunday, and at church we do something a little bit different on those Thanksgiving Sundays, where it's not a normal service, but people in the congregation give what they're thankful for. So they get up and share with the rest of the congregation what they are thankful for. And I remember sitting there that Thanksgiving Sunday, really not being able to concentrate on what was going on, because if I sat down for too long of a period of time, my back would start hurting. But I did the best that I could to actually get up and give thanks to God for the wonderful blessing that He had bestowed upon us, which was the healthy and what I know now is a very happy and healthy growing boy that I had in my belly. And I also thanked Him for His love and mercy, because I definitely know that I wouldn't have been able to arrive at that moment if it wasn't for Him. So after the service, Santiago and I decided to go ahead and go to my sister's house, who lives 1 hour away from where we are. And of course, you could imagine that that is a long car ride, and I really didn't think too much of it until I was sitting down in the car and I couldn't take the back pain. I remember having to scoot up all the way to the edge of my seat to kind of straighten out my back and just release some of the pressure that I felt in my lower back. It was really uncomfortable, definitely a feeling that I had never felt before, but it was definitely, not anything that I felt was like actual labor. Again, I was not expecting any pain in my back. I was actually expecting in my belly or in the, down there area. And that's definitely not what I was experiencing. So when I got to my sister's house, my discomfort was really at an all-time high, and I couldn't really sit because her sofas kind of sink when you sit down in them, and I couldn't bear that on my back. So what I had to do was stack 4 throw pillows, one on top of the other, and sit on top of that, and that allowed me to get some pressure off of my back, but also allowed me to maintain good posture while sitting, which was offered me a little bit more relief, but it was still very, very uncomfortable. So after an hour of being there, I just said, we really gotta go. And I remember I showed my sister my ankles, and they were pretty swollen at that time. Towards the end of my pregnancy, I started to experience a little bit more swollen feet. My hands would swell up a little bit, especially towards the evening. And she looked at me and said, you're gonna be delivering this baby very soon. And I was 38 weeks and 2 days into it at this point. So delusionally speaking, I thought I at least got a couple more weeks to go. So we left my sister's house and decided to go have sushi. They have a sushi restaurant that we really love. So Santiago and I really love this sushi restaurant that's by my sister's house, and we decided to go there and have dinner that night. So we headed out, went and had sushi. So up until this point, I'm actually eating mostly plant-based. So all of what I had in the sushi restaurant was vegetable rolls, so no need to worry about none of that raw fish contamination situation, especially for a pregnant woman. But it was delicious, and yes, I was in discomfort and pain, but I was hungry, so I needed to eat right. So after we left the sushi restaurant, again, it took us about an hour to get home from there. And I remember being about a mile away from home and experiencing so much back pain and so much discomfort that I told Santiago this would be the last time I would be able to make a long car ride before I delivered the baby. I couldn't do it anymore. It was just too discomforting, too painful, and I couldn't manage it anymore. So I knew coming home that night, that would be the last time I would actually be able to take a long car ride prior to having the baby. So I got home, I took a shower, and I went to bed, and I had a really good night's rest. I didn't actually get up during the evening. At that point of my pregnancy, I was so thirsty all the time. I drank water like water was just running out. And I remember always having to get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, and that night I slept like a baby. So it was Monday morning. I was 38 weeks and 3 days pregnant at that time, and I woke up early, 7 a.m. I got out of bed because I needed to work. And I actually worked out of my home office, and I got up, did what I normally do, went into the bathroom, sat in the toilet to pee. After that, I went into the faucet to wash my face, brush my teeth. But while I was washing my face and splashing my face with water, I felt the urge to blow my nose. So I went and blew my nose. Well, when I blew my nose, I felt something liquid pour out. And I thought this was strange because I had just gone to the toilet to pee. And I thought, that's weird. So I went back to the toilet, and as I pulled my pajama pants down again, I felt a little bit more come out. And at that point, I called out to Santiago and I said to him, I think my water just broke. And so he came immediately into the bathroom and told me, he suggested we should call the doctor. I knew at that point it was too early for anybody to be there, but I did call anyway, and the answering service told me that they had gotten a hold of the doctor, and they had suggested that I go into the office because they would be opening up shortly anyway. But at that point, I didn't have any pain. I wasn't experiencing anything that led me to believe this was extremely urgent. And I knew that I still wasn't too ready. I hadn't packed a bag. I hadn't done a few things around the house that I needed to do. So I started to get ready myself, and I asked Santiago to go ahead and do the same. So I sat down and had some breakfast. I remember having a bowl of cereal with almond milk, and Santiago installed the car seat. I got our hospital bags ready. He did as well, and we about 10:30 headed out to the doctor's office. And when I arrived there, I asked if I could use the bathroom. And when I sat down to pee, I remember that along pee came a big gush of the other liquid that I was seeing, along with some blood. And so at that point, I was definitely sure that my water had broken, and I was just there to have her confirm for her purposes, not for mine. I was definitely convinced. So I sat down after that in the office, in the consultation room, and she did a pelvic exam. And guess who it was? The same doctor that had seen me 3 days prior, the same woman that had busted out saying all of those things. And I was so hopeful that she wouldn't be the one to deliver my baby, but it all looked at that point like she would actually be the one that would be there. So she checked me. She did in fact confirm that my water had broken. Before she checked, she actually said, we just need to do this because a lot of women do assume that their water broke, but in fact it didn't. And so we need to double check and make sure. So she checked me, and immediately she said, you guys should go straight to the hospital, and I'll meet you over there. They'll be expecting you, and everything will be fine. So we headed out probably around 11:15, I would say, and headed back to the hospital, which is actually really, really close to my home. During that car ride, I actually called work. I called my boss. I was actually leading a meeting that afternoon, and I had to call my boss and ask her to lead the meeting instead, because I probably would not be available to do that. I also called my human resources department, let them know that I was in labor and I was going to be able to be at work. I had actually already logged in the morning from my home office, responded to all the emails and made sure that everything was okay there. But of course I knew I wasn't coming back home for the rest of the day, and probably would be in the hospital for a few more days after that. So I called, made sure that was fine. And then I called also, of course, my family, my sisters, my father. made sure that they knew what was going on, and explained that I was in my way to the hospital. And by this time it was about 11:30. And looking back on it right now, I would probably say that I would have made the decision to eat something prior to going into the hospital, because even though I was experiencing some pain, I knew that these things take a little bit longer, and they didn't allow me to eat when I got into the hospital until after I delivered the baby, like quite a few hours after I had delivered the baby. And so by evening I was really hungry, and I should have probably just had lunch, even though it was 11:30 in the morning at that time. I was actually the only woman on the maternity floor that day, which was really great in some ways. So when we first got in there were two nurses that took us straight in. They showed me a whole bunch of paperwork, asked me to read a bunch of things and sign, which I tried and I did. And I went straight into the bathroom, where they gave me everything to disrobe and put on. At that point, they decided, well, they had to go ahead and put the IV on me and start on the medicine, because they had already tested me for group B strep prior to delivery, and I had come out positive. So they needed immediately to give me the antibiotics needed to counteract, I guess, that positive. Unbeknownst to me though, they did say eventually also that they started me on a little bit of Pitocin, which immediately put me in so much pain. They actually, I explained to them, like, I'm experiencing a lot of pain. They told me that was normal, that labor is painful, and that it is to be expected. I remember asking, hey, can I go to the bathroom? And they put all of the monitor on me and my belly to gauge the contractions, but when I went into the bathroom, they couldn't monitor my contractions. So I went into the bathroom, and I, for some reason, felt the most comfortable sitting on the toilet. I was in there for a couple of minutes, and the nurse came in and she said, you really have to go back to the bed. But I couldn't lay back on the bed. I couldn't lay back on the bed with the type of pain that I was experiencing. And they asked me if I wanted them to give me a rocking chair. So I said, sure, bring the rocking chair. Let's see if that works. They came with a rocking chair, and it was solid wood. I couldn't sit on it without feeling like I was like sitting on top of my baby's head, which I think is why I felt so much more comfortable sitting on the toilet, because there was no pressure in that area. And I unfortunately couldn't labor in the toilet, so they set me down on the actual bed, but pulled down the feet portion, so my legs dangled, and I was able to kind of labor in that position. But the contractions weren't really being gauged properly, because the monitor is made so that you are laying flat on your back, and I don't know, I guess you barely can move for it to actually pick up on the contractions. And I was moving. There was so much intense pain, and at that point I was all but begging to have, actually no, I was definitely begging for an epidural. Anybody that would come in, I would beg for it. I would tell Santiago, please go tell them that I want an epidural. I cannot stand the pain. I really can't. And I had only been there for like an hour. I mean, it was just the craziest thing, how quickly it all happened, and how just one thing after the other. So I very quickly started asking the nurse to please give me an epidural, and they hesitated, because they said that if they gave me an epidural, it could really cause the labor to slow down. So what they wanted to do was wait until I had progressed enough so that they can give me the epidural, and then kind of, be at the home stretch at that point. But I kept on telling them, hey, listen, I feel like the baby is right there. I really do feel like he's coming, and my pain is at an all-time high. I really need that medicine. Eventually, I was able to convince the nurse to again make contact with the doctor. The doctor was not there at that point. Again, everybody thought that this would take longer, so the nurse ended up calling the doctor, and the doctor said, okay, well, you perform the pelvic exam, because she wasn't even there, the doctor wasn't there. So the nurse came back and she performed the pelvic exam, Again, the most painful thing I've ever experienced. And I feel like that is definitely even more painful, if you could even believe this, than pushing the baby out. Because at least pushing the baby out is like just relief driven, right? But this pelvic exam situation, this is just pain. That's what it is. It's just pain. So she checked me and she wasn't sure. So she called another nurse, and the other nurse gave me yet another pelvic exam. And I was just on the verge of just death. I remember looking at Santiago and saying, I don't think I'm going to make this. I don't think I'm going to make it through this. So at that point, they said, you know what, you're really far along. I don't remember how many centimeters I was at that point. But she went and spoke to the doctor, and the doctor approved the epidural. So immediately they came back, and I said, how long is it going to take for the anesthesiologist to get here? I was the only woman on delivering at that time, so he came right away. I remember screaming every single contraction. And I had heard up until that point that you get a contraction and it lasts a few seconds, and then you get a wave of just calm. But then you get another contraction after that. So the wave of pain followed by calm, wave of pain followed by calm. There was no calm. It was wave of pain followed by more waves of pain immediately. So I felt like I couldn't really catch my breath at that point. And so every single time that I would experience that contraction, I would just hold my arms out for Santiago and hold him really tight. So like squeeze him. When the epidural guy came, he said I couldn't hold on to Santiago. And I felt like, what in the world am I going to do? Number two, he asked me to consent to all of these other things. And I said, I am in pain. I looked at him and I said, do whatever you need to do. I consent. So he looked at me and he said, like, no, we can't do it under duress. And I said, too late, too bad. I am under duress and I consent. Do it and do it now. So he went ahead and started to get the process going. Now, this is another process altogether. He tried to get the epidural in and was unsuccessful for a few tries. And so my story with this is very unconventional and not like anything I had ever heard before. But essentially, I had to sit up on top of the bed and hug the nurse. So I couldn't touch Santiago, but I had to hug the nurse so that I could stay still in one same spot, working through my contractions, and as he put in the epidural. Well, Santiago was looking at the whole thing happen, and so he tells me that when they initially put in the catheter to put in the medicine, the actual medicine was not going through when he pushed in the needle. It was as if something was in there that wasn't letting it go in. So he had to pull things out, wash things out, and then try to put it back in. When he puts it back in my bag, instead of the medicine going in, blood started gushing out into the line. So again, everything had to come out and things had to be restarted. The third time that he tried doing this, he actually kind of just shoved the needle, the medicine with the needle in until it actually gave way, and I was given the medicine. It felt like an eternity. And now I know why. There were like a few tries that actually occurred. So eventually, after all was said and done, I remember literally just looking at him and saying, how long until it takes effect, until I cannot feel the pain anymore? And he said, it's just going to take a couple of minutes. I looked at the time, and at that time it was about 3:15 in the afternoon. Well, I laid back, and as I laid back, actually I think it was about 3:10 more or less. And as I laid back to lay down on the bed, I just felt the uncontrollable urge to push. And I started bearing down and pushing. And the nurse immediately said, no, don't push. And I was so confused because it's definitely an urge that you cannot stop. You cannot just say, let me just not do this. No, it's like an animal instinct of this is what your body needs to do, and it just does it. So I was there bearing down, pushing, and the doctor then said to me, if you keep on pushing, I'm going to have to check you again, as if it was like a threat. And I thought to myself, like, check, because there's nothing that I can do. So they checked, and as soon as they checked, they said, oh my God, she's ready. Everything started moving, boom, 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 boom. In a matter of minutes, I was already like, everybody was around me, and let's go for it, right? 3 contractions later, I had a baby. So between the time that the epidural was done and the time that I pushed the baby out, it was a matter of like 5 minutes. So I didn't actually get the opportunity to feel the effects of having had an epidural until after I had delivered the baby, because in my view, they definitely took way too long to give me the epidural. And I do think that was because they weren't listening to what I was saying, that I was feeling. They kept on telling me, it's okay, this is labor hurts, and it's going to take longer than this. I mean, I remember one of the nurses even saying, you'll be lucky if you give birth before I leave for the night. And she left at 6 o'clock in the afternoon. Imagine that. I delivered at 3:16 in the afternoon. So that landed me with a baby in my arms. I mean, the whole thing was just so fast. I really didn't even have the opportunity to kind of like comprehend what was happening. And then all of a sudden I had a baby in my arms. It was the weirdest thing and the most magical experience of my life, all wrapped into one, including all the pain, by the way. It was intense. Look who woke up from his nap. Yeah. So that was my labor and delivery story, and honestly, I would do it all over again in a heartbeat for this little one right here. The good, the bad, the painful, every bit of it, I would do it again for this little one right here. So before I actually left the hospital, 3 days, actually, I delivered on Monday. I left the hospital on Wednesday. I did see my doctor, one of the doctors in the practice, and I explained my disappointment about not feeling heard. I also explained everything that happened and how I felt like I was put in way too much pain because nobody really listened to what I was saying and how fast I thought things were progressing. And so he actually told me, you know, the good part was that I had delivered fast, and the bad part was that I had delivered fast. So he assured me that these things would be noted in my chart, so that in any future pregnancies, the doctor would know that I am a fast deliverer. I deliver fast, apparently. But regardless, at the end of the day, I think that the outcome was the best, in that now I have this sweet baby boy with me, and from the very beginning he's been such a wonderful and amazing blessing in our lives. So I couldn't ask for anything more of a better outcome than this, and I am super happy and super blessed. Who's that in there? Who's that in there? ¿Quién es ese? ¿Quién es ese que está ahí? Ese es Sebastian. So thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe if you have not already, and I will see you in my next video. Bye. Bye. See, bye. Bye. Say bye. Bye bye. 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 Bye bye. Hello. How are you? Hello, Bebito.